Harvard Divinity School.
A Remarkable Life in Poetry, October 17th, 2024.
Hello. Hi. Welcome to the last Peripheries event for this semester, our third one. We're taking a break because next semester is going to be really intense with Alice Oswald's coming for 1 month. It's going to do multiple events, so we need a bit of a break after this. But I'm really glad for this sort of warm, intimate reading tonight, and the three poets that we have reading are really special to us. Some people are running in. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Josh Kurtz first. In workshops, we've been in workshop together. I was really honored to have witnessed the sort of rapid blossoming of this really unique talent. Josh writes you into these sort of very intimate, compelling worlds. I wanted to say almost like fictions or short story feeling. And he knows that then you have to inhabit that poem and find its wisdom. He is a writer and weaver at HDS in Cambridge and a student at HDS. He studies Judaism, grief, and cultural heritage. He's worked in community organizing in Washington and in Romania, and he's published in Smithsonian Folklife magazine, interesting, Colorado Review, and Academy of American Poets, wow, and in Peripheries, this upcoming Peripheries. So, Josh, will you read to us for some 10 minutes? Yeah, welcome.
Okay, I was telling Shira that I have not done a poetry reading for a really long time. I have printed out the weirdest poems I wrote in our past 2 workshops. They're all kind of about animals or about teeth. So I'm sorry, and you're welcome in advance. Okay, I'm going to time myself too. Thank you all for being here. It's so wonderful to meet you. I mean, we haven't officially met yet, but to be here with you. Okay. The Factory. The factory once made all manner of things: tiny mannequins, silver sconces, incandescent fish bowls, even tea tins with fake inlaid mother of pearl. But the factory was best known for its teeth. Mostly gold and silver, the occasional porcelain crown or bridge. It depended on the season, the year. In 1968, everyone wanted platinum dentures and aquamarine implants, something to do with Nixon or Mercury, I think, or the war. Everyone had just seen Hair on Broadway, except, of course, the folks at the factory. They didn't have time for nudity or strobe lights. They all had nephews who were born here in this unfinished city with its fire escapes and dumpsters. They're still building it, my grandma exclaimed from that taxi from JFK all those years ago. One plastic suitcase packed with teeth mold powder, a bit of plaster, a tongue depressor and tooth tray, some pliers, and one hand-knit glove. Within 5 years, she had a factory, and though she and my grandfather still worked the torch from time to time, they loved to sit in that dusty office with its one glass wall overlooking all those plastic chairs they bought downtown, muddy green and so uncomfortable. Years before, my grandfather, let's call him Tiny, spent 3 years in a labor camp that used to be a monastery. 3 years for a fake tooth made in a hurry, a gold coin and brass mold, his tiny fire in some Bucharest basement, glinting off shelves of jars, the smell of brine, so many teeth spread out on the floor. He wouldn't call it a labor of love, but it was something. They never grow back, he used to say, with an ounce of pride, a little regret. Now the factory is a Rutgers dormitory, or maybe a dining hall. I've never seen it. I can't imagine they kept the workbenches, the evergreen chairs, a crown in a tiny frame. All I have is a button in the shape of a tooth, The platonic ideal of a tooth, I'd say, white and sharp with a gold outline and the Congress written across. I imagine some conference somewhere, in Ohio maybe, a ballroom in some baked Alaska, a red tablecloth, though who really knows? Maybe they met monthly at the Coney Island Aquarium. Maybe they voted on the next year's dental trends. How about papier-mâché teeth in May, dentures for every day of the week? How about steak dentures and bread dentures, dentures for kissing and dentures to avoid kissing? Maybe there was infighting or infidelity. Maybe the metal workers hated the ceramicists. Maybe they all missed someone back home. I like to think about my grandparents sitting on a bench at the aquarium rating all the sharks' teeth. First the hammerhead, always the hammerhead. I wonder if they ever looked into each other's mouths. Thank you. This is a poem about eating rooting powder for your indoor plants, which I don't recommend, which I haven't done, to be clear. This time I cut the monstera 2 inches below the node, the one with the axillary bud peeking through, its brittle skin peeling slightly, paper thin and splotched white, all the leaves starting to curl at their edges, a mess of veins tumbling over the rim of the pot. This stem has been robbed of its moisture, now a rot tunnel, an ambush of splinters, at least 10 of them lodged in my thumb, my ring finger, the skin between knuckles. I placed the cutting in a mason jar full of cold water. The water has to be cold. You never know what's living inside warm water. Together, we take a shot of rooting powder, indole 3-butyric acid to be precise. It decomposes before boiling. I couldn't tell you where it comes from, but I dust my nose and inhale deeply. I sit in a black swivel chair and stare out the window. I contemplate patterns and lightning bugs, the time it takes to zest a lemon, why one leaf is standing straight up while the others are collapsing into themselves, why spring doesn't come all at once. The powder starts to take effect. I don't want to be rooted to this chair, this filthy cloth and cheap plastic, so we take a walk together, me and my cutting, my 2 legs, my unaligned hips, half my body longer than the other. Now the pores in my left hand are starting to sprout. To tickle the nerves underneath, I'm standing in the leafy green aisle of the grocery store. Is that mold on the monstera, the mustard, the cantaloupe microgreens, the shopping cart, the tip of my nose, the faces of passers-by? Not a single one stops to ask, and I'm grateful to them, their worries and rashes, their dirty windows, all the root vegetables rotting at the bottom of this bin, the way their skin shrivels in the sun. This one's called a wolf. The wolf's head is resting on a stone pillar in my neighbor's front lawn. Technically, it is only half a head, the front half to be precise, with unkempt ears and a nose too big for its face. The wolf looks down at the sidewalk. It can only look down. Its neck is glued to a dusty white base, all organic forms, an artistic interpretation of coral maybe, though this wolf would not be caught dead with coral. There's a matte purple car in the driveway, low to the ground so that the wolf can't get in, though it couldn't anyway, half its head is caved in, blank space. I see a child put his head in it. I see the garage, it's all free weights and wolf busts, bits of loose stucco, small gray tiles, a napkin, more children. It's pretty convincing, the hair around and between the wolf's eyes, thinning down its nose, trumpets blaring from the nostrils. The lawn is dying, it's terrified. This part of New Jersey smells like the sewage treatment facility across the river, with the ice skating rink and amphitheater on top, the restaurant that sells exotic meat from a refurbished golf cart. I walk briskly past the head, the car, the house with motion-censored bird repellent. I only come down this street for the view, the dead end, the one the wolf can't see. Obviously that poem's about New Jersey. Thank you for anyone who's from there. Geode room. In this light, the cross-section of the Rosa del Inca pulses like an iris, burnt rose bleeding along the vertical. Its inky pupil retreats, a memory of veins tapped, roots polished thick with wax. All over, dust is spinning. Quartz sprouts like rhizome weeds from cracks in the linoleum. Everything is saturated in purple light. Salt packets tossed on the ground, backpacks, plastic folders, a lost wallet, bits of hair from the wildlife exhibit next door. You crawl inside an amethyst that was unearthed in Franklin, New Jersey, pans ripping on sharp crystals, and you wonder about the hands that cracked this open, where the calluses formed, how deep the cuts, all the shades of bruise. In the geode, a universe emerges, breath extending from piercing rock, skin caught on jagged edges, your eyes bouncing from light to light. Nothing about this is obvious. Someday this room will be a table, 2 sets of cufflinks, a chandelier on another planet, one you'll never see. Later, in the gift shop, you look through a bin of $10 geodes you can break open with a hammer. A kit for growing crystals, a catalog of glass flowers, a rack of greeting cards to the future, an application to purchase shares of a calcite mine in Cumbria. In the corner of your eye, you see a high school class walk by. You see them marvel at stones that look like fresh snow. They reach for their chisels and notepads while the geodes, surprised, gently quiver. This one's about a goose, which isn't that surprising for people who know me. Zambila. In the story, my great-great-grandfather is followed home after a long day of work and drink by a white goose. White because in my imagination it could not have been any other type of goose, such as the Toulouse goose or even the pink-footed goose, though that is certainly a beautiful goose. But in the story, my great-great-grandfather is escorted home by a Roman goose with its orange beak and proud tuft of hair combed back, a goose bred over 2,000 years ago and known to be sacred still to the goddess Juno. They say that sometime in the late 4th century, the honking of this goose saved Rome from attack, but in this story, my great-great-grandmother sends the goose to a bar to bring her husband home, it being many decades ago, before the war when geese could be trusted with such an errand. In the story, the goose is named Zambila, borrowed from the Ottoman Turkish word sumbul and the Persian word sambul, both meaning hyacinth, a flower not the type of macaw, though I like to imagine Zambila feeding on nuts and announcing her presence to all those who care to listen. The word Zambila is pronounced with an sound at the end. Languid but guttural, you have to be embarrassed to say it. You have to make it sound like a goose. In the story, which takes place in the outskirts of Bucharest, the little Paris of the East, according to some, the goose was my great-great-grandfather's confidant, this being before the war, when there were still confidants. We all know a goose is a good listener. My great-great-grandfather was called Papa Mic, meaning little daddy, though Papa can also mean bye-bye in Romanian, a language that prides itself on its proximity to Italian, though with a bit more woe baked in. In my family, the story ends with Zambila disappearing, maybe even being eaten by the family, this being a story of poverty after all, as well as of the goose. Recently, though, we have resurrected Zambila, performed a seance on the concrete banks of the Danube, this being after the war, Bucharest now a dissonant note, a harsh word, a bad place for a Roman goose who is, after all, sacred in more ways than one, all goose born, fully formed from the mouths of goose barnacles, which grow like callous claws on the slopes of rock and on flotsam caught in the throat of the ocean. In this story, Zambila is alive and well in a village that celebrates the 1st of March by tying red and white string to tree branches. After all, a goose can mean many things to many people, amongst them my mother and I, sitting in the archive of goose surrounded by hyacinths as far as the eye can see. Should I do one more? Okay. Thanks. It's good. I have one more printed. Her bear. Her bear is named Marlene after the singer, of course, her voice always on the brink of some revelation. The bear is chestnut brown with 2 emerald beads for eyes, one beginning to come loose. She's frozen in a sitting position, the bottoms of her feet coarse and filthy, her ears a bit too pointy, a mess of black whiskers glued to her nose. Marlene has known many dictators, many jaded rabbis, many cruel children who can't take care of themselves, let alone a tiny bear with a bow made of blue silk. Her body is covered in mohair from Turkish goats, though she was stitched together in a remote village in a corner of Romania, a village obsessed with wooden gates. The villagers can't get enough of them. Everyone's always carving something: crucifixes, great white pelicans, oaks, the faces of dead poets. The old saying goes, "I'm tired of being admired," and Marlene is no exception. She'd prefer the quiet of a cottage with no running water, electricity every other Thursday, a painting no larger than a palm hanging on her doorknob, nothing that depicts St. Andrew. She doesn't believe that he preached on the banks of the Black Sea. Have you ever been to the coast? It doesn't need a patron. On this day, the bear is held under the arm of a child. She does an impression of the singer. Everything sounds so woeful in German, and the way Marlene Dietrich held a cigarette, wore a scarf, sat in a hard chair. The child can't get her voice low enough. She keeps squeaking and squeezing her bear, both her eyes now bulging from their soft sockets. They're in the line at the airport, a checkpoint, soldiers everywhere, a red star carved on the floor, the lights flicker and music blares. No one else is clutching a bear. Her parents look worried. Nothing here is as it seems, not the deep hum of planes, not the mosaic on the stained wall, its colorful landscape, its crescent of golden wheat, not the eyes of pet cats in crates, their owners guns slinged, not the gurgle of polenta being cooked in a back room, someone on their lunch break, not even the bear whose stomach is stuffed with cash, photos of castles in the mountains, a small flag from before the war. The child doesn't know that Marlene is splitting at her seams. A body wasn't meant to carry this. Ribbons of light pulsing on the ceiling, her parents carrying a suitcase, there's nothing in it. They're at the front of the line now. A soldier with a young face asks for the bear, takes the bear, presses his fingers into her stomach, comments on the child's wide eyes, now water, now piercing. Thank you.
That was really fantastic, Josh, and so much fun and disturbing. And okay, this is really special now. So I'm going to introduce Ariella Ruth. And some of you might know that she's both an alum of HDS, but also was ran. Oh, no, whatever. You know, I thought you were. Okay, no. But you were like pivotal in helping us start Peripheries, the journal, and this poetry program. And you worked behind the scenes for many years, but you also performed in this room as a poet. I remember us launching your chapbook here, and all dressed in black. It was really fun. So I'm so excited to welcome you back to CSWR, which was your home for so long, and this program, which you helped to start. Okay, so Ariella Ruth is the author of the chapbook, launched in Black Clothing, Remnants, a finalist for many manuscript prizes. Apparently you have a poem that's engraved on a sandstone monolith in Colorado for the ages. And you have an MFA from Naropa University's Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And you now work at the design school and should come back and read for us often. Okay, please.
Thank you so much, Shara. It's awesome to be back, and it was very rude that I corrected you. I should just, I went to school here. I don't know. When you're around a place long enough, it just feels that way. So, yeah, so grateful to you. Thank you for inviting me to read and inviting me back, because it's very much a home to me. So, okay, I'm going to read some poems from my latest manuscript that's called "The Womb is a Palimpsest," and the launch party reading that Shara is referencing, where you read and many other women, and we were all dressed in black. I was like 5 or 6 months pregnant with my daughter, and a lot of my writing is very much about her and just what the last few years have been like. So, okay, so this is from "The Womb is a Palimpsest." Night blooming flowers become her. Night blooming flowers become her. Strung light, moon garden, sparse, ethereal sapphire clouds. She peeks out a dark glare window, wishes tulips a good night. Good night, sapphire, moonlit, unfilled. She peeks out, ethereal and sparsely, amidst dark tulips. Floral cloud glare, wishes, strung. Not person, mother. Baby rocks to sleep, a dark room. Sing yellow submarine, words to hums. John Lennon was killed 40 years ago today. Do mothers typically forget this much? I walked outside last June, carried you unknowingly. There will always be new mothers born, photos untaken. I've forgotten one can assume line breaks insinuate breath. When water sheds, mother's visibility discarded. Feet press against yours, almost don't notice our identical temperature. Born on feet, I carry you. One can assume mothers do forget, line breaks. Not person, was killed 40 years ago, in photos, temperature untaken. New mothers walk outside. I walk outside to insinuate breath in June. When water hums to John Lennon in rooms always unknowingly pressed against. Baby, I've almost forgotten. Years discarded. There will be words sung yellow, visible, noticed. Mother sheds to sleep, our identical dark, today our last. Visible line breaks sing yellow. I've forgotten today unknowingly. Baby hums, a submarine carries, mothers all identical, discarded there. Dark water born outside. Do mothers notice sleep? Not person walks this much, always pressed against feet, to rocks. Carry you. Typically, one can assume words were forgotten, killed. Last year untaken, from mother's rooms. Breath unshed, almost 40 words ago. Do photos of mothers born break lines? There is yours to hum and kill. I walk in shed rooms, discarded mothers always lastly visible, outside in June. Our identical water, much darkness, feet submerge, John Lennon's words sing yellow, unknowingly insinuate forgotten breath. Carry you as new mothers did years ago to sleep. One can assume babies, not person, don't notice. They all forget. Words unprotected. To reach for a notebook is to change direction in the womb. You have to mean it. You settle, capture levels of soft and harsh in light when she stops quietly to think and speak sweetly the moment. In light she stops quietly to think in the womb, reach for pages, change all direction. Words unprotected, know to linger, capture the ebb of harsh, soft, settle there, speak sweetly. You have to mean it. She watches me stand still in frigid water. This doesn't belong to me. This has only ever been a dream. Writing practice is a severe shock to all systems. Organs no memory, but ache in unison with her elongated cries. Organs elongate in unstill water. This writing doesn't belong to me. That dream in unison is only memory, has only ever been memory. All body systems cry as standing practice. This is akin to. I wish I could write about something that doesn't dry my hands. On days I don't recognize my own lines, she writes, "Hold on, I need to fix the sky." Recognize hands, she writes dry, hold on to something, akin to days, lines. Night terrors. There is no distinction of day to night. I speak of repetition and abandonment, plush, thick embodiment. What happens to clavicle now? Visionless, seams in space. A birthing body once is never alone, is in always splitting open. Scattered autonomy and spit. Gnaw. Sunk earthward, mother came out gnawing and bled, contorted, must learn to reform. Said she wasn't tired, 'cause she was excited about the moon. She gnaws tired on mother's bones. Slinky earth moon will never conform. Mother bleeds in excitement. The gnawing asks to confront the earth, moon form, blood path, withered, sunken bone. I have just one more, but I also wanted to thank, I don't know if she's in the room, but Lori Sedgwick for everything she did to coordinate this and everything that happens here. Okay, this is called Apparition. Cat gazes up at the child. She wraps him in a rainbow afghan woven by a grandmother. Enough tolerance over time is love unveiled to its own surprise. On the 96 bus, I am told, you don't have any magic. Water recedes, gives way to mermaid tails twisted below the pelvic fin. I understand a raw poem as unable to acknowledge an apparition, so emotionally unprepared the poem decides it's only missed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ariella. Ruth, that was gorgeous. Okay, I'm actually going to introduce someone to introduce Isaac Jarnot now. I invited because I can't. Yeah. We need to have special introductions sometimes. So, Rita Powell, who is a chaplain for Harvard's Episcopal community and is also a poet who is published in Peripheries, probably other places, but that's all that matters, is now going to do an introduction for us.
Thank you. So Isaac Jarnot is a poet and independent scholar. He was born in Buffalo, New York in 1967, receiving a bachelor's degree in English from SUNY Buffalo, self-referred to as a townie, which I resonate with. And then was a student in the early 90s in the MFA program at Brown, and in 2021 received a Master of Divinity degree from New York Theological Seminary. And he has worked as a teacher, hospital chaplain, and ornamental gardener. Currently completing a PhD coursework at Drew Theological School. And his research interests include decoloniality, climate collapse, and the Anthropocene extinction. And I wanted to just say that it's been my great thrill to get to know this writer over the past season. And I feel really grateful for your poetics that insist on the possibility of the prophetic and the transcendent as central to the not the work, but to the project of poetry. And so I'm just really excited to hear you read, and I'm so grateful that we all get to be together and just had such wonderful poems so far. And it's a delight and a privilege to get to meet you and hear from you. So thank you.
I'm really happy to be here, and I am happy that you are all here. So I feel like Josh invoked the animals, but also kind of the New York school a little bit. Does anyone ever tell you that or no? No, I was wondering about that, yeah. I would almost say a little bit of Jim Brodie. You ever read Jim Brodie? You got it. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of James Schuyler. Yeah. And then the parenting, which part of what I've been one of my projects the last 15 years as a kid, right? So the parenting, it really speaks to me. So you, beautiful setup, thank you. Gorgeous poems. So I had this book come out from Wave Books, and I actually started that series of lectures here, but on Zoom about 4 years ago or so. So it's great to be here in person. And I was trying to decide what to read, because I think that my publisher gave you all like some publicity copy, and it said "A Remarkable Life in Poetry." It's like, oh, that's really like it's so. And then midway between the time that we decided we were going to do a reading tour and today, I entered this gender transition, and now I'm like a white dude. So like a white dude and a remarkable life in poetry sounds so pretentious. So so what I want to talk about today is how remarkable life in general is. And I think we can all agree on that, because who would have thought we'd all be here, right? So I'm going to read a little bit from one of these talks, and then a little bit of poetry, and I'm going to time it a little bit, because it's 10 after 6. Okay. So we're going to end at 6:30, just so you know, so you don't have to like worry, right? Okay. So I read a bit of this talk called "Is That a Real Poem or Did You Just Make It Up?" And it's it's a little bit it's because it's the last piece in this series of lectures. It kind of and also because it was written kind of in the midst of the pandemic, it has a feeling to it that's, I would say, my more pessimistic kind of take on the Anthropocene. But its subject, that has been kind of changing for me, just out of the fact that we're all still here, and that this idea of Anthropocene is an evolving creative event, even though it feels heavy. I'm just going to call it an evolving creative event. And so if it feels pessimistic, that's not like my total take on it, although, all right, we'll decide later. I wrote this on a train from New York City to Chicago, and I was feeling at least a little bit melancholy, maybe because of the autumn season that seriously lacks autumnal weather, or maybe because of traveling away from things familiar in a time of such great social instability. So that all stands. This is like 4 years later. We'll just keep all that. This is all true. Very worried about the next 20 days or after that. I've been thinking about the idea of first things and final things, not particularly in relation to my own life, but in relation to the Holocene extinction event that is upon us, which feels to me like the universe's attempt to make a new and different poem out of a troubled world. I have my own upstate New York origin story that contributes to the first things of my poems: gravel driveways, snowy owls, willow trees, mourning doves, football, a bowling alley, Jell-O, and Campbell's soup. It's kind of like some of your stuff there, Josh, yeah. It wasn't quite New Jersey, but it was Buffalo. It's pretty down-home stuff, pretty Americana. My old friend and mentor, the poet Jack Clark, called it the Derby Shuffle. Derby, New York is the town I was from. The Derby Shuffle, the way that I and my poems make our way along through this lifespan. He meant that I wasn't going to be a fancy academic poet, nor should I want to, and I understand the nuance of what he meant even more now, that over time what I've done as a poet comes out of the guts of the origin story, that at the matrix of this messy mix of snowy owls and Campbell's soup, I've developed an ear for the mystery that brings all those elements together into the creation. It's not a rarefied gift. Here I'd return to a line of Spinoza's, that prophecy or poetry implies not a peculiarly perfect mind, but a peculiarly vivid imagination, which is usually not worth much of anything in our culture. I'm thinking of a phrase from the book of Revelation. What does it mean for the poet to act as prophet in imagining a new heaven and a new earth? What does it mean to see the undersides and oversides of this multiverse that we inhabit? That might sound like something a fancy poet would say, but what I really mean is something simple. The going reality for me of the rocks and gravel and snowy owls and Jell-O and Campbell's soup that occupies my origin story brought with it a feeling that there were mysteries outside of the seen world. The poem is not only something I make up, it is also something that makes itself revealed. It is a manifestation of life, a revelation of another order, a new heaven and a new earth, a breakthrough event where the divine streams in. I kind of like saying that in this context of this place, yeah. I may have raised the red flag of a fancy metaphysical Neoplatonic spiritual idea of what poetry is, but I would like to explore it also from a more practical angle, from Wallace Stevens' more sober psychoanalytic reading. Stevens writes in his essays on poetics of the power of the poem that it is a violence from within that protects us from a violence without. It is the imagination pressing back against the pressure of reality. That tension is very real for me, between the imagination and reality, or as I would also put it, between the sacred and the secular, or between the eternal and the temporal orders. Because I always experienced the day-to-day status quo of American life as a violence, I was more than willing to jump into life as a poet, and a life where the let me start that sentence over. Because I always experienced the day-to-day status quo of American life as a violence, I was more than willing to jump into life as a poet, and a life where the imagination could press back against that reality, as Stevens insisted. In the process, I also found that it's not just the violence of the imagination that protects us from any external violence. It's also the tenderness of the imagination that bears witness to the pathos of the real, of the profane, of the temporal. I think of poetry as a process of building boats and building houses and making storehouses and treasuries. Staying busy building an eternal boat is exactly what I'm doing in the poem. I also think the power of the poem for me is its ability to exercise authority over what I call, in one early piece of writing, the target in the marketplace next to near the temple of the void. When I brought parts of my first book in progress to a classroom of fellow students in about 1993 at Brown University, one of them said in exasperation, "It reads like the plans of the quiet guy next door who builds bombs." And I thought that's exactly what I wanted to do. The title of this talk comes from a story I remember the poet Bob Creeley telling about an audience member at a reading asking him, "Is that a real poem or did you just make it up?" After all these years, my memory fails me, and I'm not sure if it was him who was asked this question, or if he was relating the story of another poet being asked this question. All I know is that it happened to a poet at a poetry reading. And I love this question because the obvious answer is, yes, I just made it up because I had a feeling about the potentiality of a new heaven and a new earth, and I want to inhabit it. I've always had a feeling there was something beyond the actual Walmart on the highway. The easy way to describe it is to call it the eternal, the thing that we know is there outside of us. Though Jack Spicer says there are many ways we can describe that something beyond. He suggests we could also call it the Martians or the id. But he was a good Calvinist, so I suspect he knew it could also be a thing called God. And I don't mind calling it God or creation, a mystery that we get a glimpse of here and there that shines through events and language. I'm gonna skip a little bit more about the childhood, et cetera, Walmarts and Kmart. I used to go to Kmart when I was a kid. Okay. Yet it would be a mistake to let the Americana that I'm talking about sit on its romantic pedestal. That's the Americana, the Kmart. Okay. At no point can I turn away from the fearful lack of repentance that has doomed our culture. This is the pessimism. I flagged it earlier. Okay. Sorry. So I just this kind of taking on of the white American tradition of experimental poetry that I so love, but I gave a talk at the Naropa Institute, or it's now called Naropa University, at the Jack Kerouac School for Disembodied Poetics last summer, and I said, well, I think we've reached a point where we have our heroes, and now we can say that they weren't perfect, and let's talk about it. And people really didn't like that. They got really, I kind of got booed out of Naropa, which for the 30 years that I've been there, this has never happened. yes, I'm going to just say it here because you guys are far away from the Jack Kerouac School and you don't care. At no point can I turn away from the fearful lack of repentance that has doomed our culture. From my Derby Shuffle adjacent to the Seneca Nation, to Charles Olson's Westward Sprawl, to Robert Duncan's Mysterious Golden Gate, to Frank O'Hara's Dirty New York City, there is always something amiss. Those cattails waving in the marshy field, the snowy owl and the willow tree, and the myriad stars in the sky, and the jello and the Campbell's soup, and the genocidal tendencies of a global super predator known as Homo sapiens. That push and pull, that tension, and that conversation between the eternal and the temporal, between the sacred and the profane, is the spark for my poems. And those tensions pressed me into the form of a poet. Cattails interrupted by a red stop sign, interrupted by a car or many cars like bees on the highway. The melancholy returns of knowing that this experiment is coming to an end. Not just the poem, the life's work, or the individual lives, but the grain elevators, the bridges, a manifest destiny cursed from the beginning with a greed that was called progress at the expense of all else. An extinction event, the sixth and largest. The prophetic in my poetry is the acknowledgement of that. The melancholy is the mixed sadness and joy that we share in this moment in bearing witness to an unfolding drama, a new cosmic poem. I like that. I just want to just flag that and just sit with that for a minute, because I think that one of the things that happened when I was on my way up here from New York, I'm looking at the watch, I know what time it is, okay, 22. One of the things that happened when I was coming up on the train yesterday from New York is I had this terrible lonely feeling that I think that happens to all of us. Well, of course it does, and thinking, I said this at the reading last night, of why do we poets do what we do, right? And why does it matter? And I thought of this line of Allen Ginsberg's, the two lines: the weight of the world is love, and that we do this to ease the connecting relationality, to ease the pain of living. So one of the things that was happening in this particular lecture was this idea of just putting on the table like that kind of unsustainable manifest destiny white European human moment, and then at the same time I come here and I think through it again, and I think, well, I think what I was saying, like, oh, it's not my remarkable life in poetry, it's remarkable that we are all here and that we imperfectly are still all able to connect to each other. That is where I want to stop with this, because you can get this book or listen to parts of it on YouTube. What I want to do is read a poem for Josh and a poem for Ariella, because I feel like there was a call and response in this space, and because there are these, I saw some Buddhas around, I'm going to read a really old poem called Mu is Om backwards for Josh. I don't have goose poems. I was chased by a goose when I was a kid, and my uncle laughed at me, so I have never written about geese. I'm very opposed to geese, so. Moo is Om backwards. That the cows moo in the field, that the cows moo in the field quite loudly, that the cows are mooing in the field, that in the field the cows are mooing, that I love things, that they love me back, that the cows all love each other and the daisies, that the daisies love each other and the cows, that by loving in transcendence there are cows and there are daisies that they love, that in loving cows and loving cows and loving there are daisies, that the daisies sing but not the cows, that the singing daisies sing, that the singing daisies sing their songs to cows and then the cows do moo, that the mooing cows in fields moo to the singing sounds of daisies, that the mooing and the singing cows are mooing at the sound of singing daisies, that the mooing and the singing in my dreams must cease, that the cows must sleep and love the daisies singing, that the sleeping daisies mooing love the cows, at night asleep in mooing at the daisies in the field. And let me find a kiddo poem. Oh, okay. I just this book called A Princess Magic Presto Spell is I actually started it when my daughter was born, and I felt like I couldn't do anything except for hang out with her because she was a really fussy kid for the first 3 years, and so I just it was all about her. So I would write 3 words a day. I would take care of her, eat sometimes, and write 3 words a day. And so over time there were 10 sections of this book over the first 10 years of her life. So this is 10 years of work. You see how busy she kept me. So I'm just going to read this little section of this, which is it's the 5th section of this book. It's called The Sublime Port, and I did this thing that she no longer approves of, which I stole lines from her. So, I wish the world was made of candy, and all the princesses in the castle were getting ready to get married. I remember a blue Ford Pinto, a pixelated screen door, and maple branches swaying in the breeze. There were dust heads, bison fairy purse, the beast Edith. There was a butt snack with a sausage on its head. There was a Duncan making rugs, de Koonings of ghee, conjuries of events, and I don't like my hair. The issue of Sarah drinking from the toilet was an interesting one. A sparrow model, a leaf pizza for the worms, into the eve of the relatively long arms of Uncle Mike's Norway maples crinkling brown, the heaven tree of stars, promises of horseradish, humid night blue fruit, into the eve of a picnic of trees, of an autumnal yard of Swiss chard, the dark of topsy 2 feet, pork and nightshades, into the eve of a commodious vicar, that silence impending. 2 people who love each other have dry skin. The small sneakers next to the big sneakers that make a household. Waxing crescent moon, frost at midnight, and my king, he thought about guppies all the time. The moon over Schenectady, the cold, soft moon, the cold, full moon. A golden basin filled with scorpions. What pleasure does Antarctica give us? An intruder in a cubbyhole in a dream. For let me know, let men know, a waning moon smoldering day rage, for white swans on the Hudson, moon in Virgo, then a rut. 2 girls, Bea and Daphne, were at yoga. It was nighttime. Everyone was asleep at Fred's house. They were so afraid they holded on tight to Fred. The air awake through Mr. Morales's balls, catkins of birch in the jacuzzi, dogwoods in bloom against the deception which we are practicing on these bees. Did Kirsten's gambling cause Dale to become unfaithful? Meditations on death interrupted by the empty shampoo bottle. Aches slowly returning. Autism for autumn. September for department. For John the Baptist's Bagel Maven Cafe. Heaps of Bruce in the Wiskoy. Riot Veer and root beer. Shit, teeth, eyeballs, the tiny Kandorians. The voices of the dead saved in voicemail. The Chilean neighbors, small dogs, large and unusual heart. Thank you.
Sponsor, Center for the Study of World Religions.
Copyright 2024, the President and Fellows of